Hey folks, this is Yuri Karasawa with Japan Ball, 12 MPB teams in 12 days. Let's begin today with the Chunichi Dragons. Last year, they were 60, 75, and 8, last place in the Central League. They actually haven't made the postseason since 2012, which is the longest postseason drought currently in MPB. They had an OPS plus of 99 and an ERA plus of 92. So these are weighted stats where 100 is always league average. We use these just to kind of balance the playing field among all teams, no matter what park they play in, and no matter the league offensive environment. So 99 OPS plus, they were right around league average, but a 92 ERA plus means they were about 8% below average. And they also had negative 31 defensive runs saved, so a bit below average defensively. Now, one thing to note with this team is that Kazuki Inoue is taking over as manager. Now, they've cycled through 3 or 4 different skippers at this point since the last time they made the postseason, but we will see if Inoue brings more luck than Kazuyoshi Tatsunami, who had them finishing in last place during all 3 years where he was manager. Now, off-season additions and subtractions. Some of the notable additions include Mao Ito, a relief pitcher from the Rakuten Eagles who they got in the active player draft. That's basically the Rule 5 equivalent in MPB. And then their foreign additions. So Nash Walters, who's a reliever that has a little bit of MLB experience. They picked him out of Driveline Pro Day, actually. So a guy that, they're really banking on with the stuff. They think his pitch shapes are just going to play really well. Junior Marte, another reliever that has had a decent amount of MLB experience before. Kyle Muller, who was with the Athletics last year and put up some pretty decent numbers. Once a former top prospect with the Atlanta Braves. I believe he was in the Sean Murphy trade. And then Jason Vossler, kind of a utility man, another guy that has pretty solid MLB experience, most notably back in 2021 with the San Francisco Giants. In terms of subtractions, Koji Fukutani, who was kind of on the fringes of the rotation, he's heading over to the Nippon Ham Fighters now. And then the big ones are Rydell Martinez and Shinnosuke Ogasawara. So Martinez, arguably the number one closer in MPB over the past half decade, he is going over to the Yomiuri Giants, which does leave a hole in the back end of the bullpen for this team. And then Shinnosuke Ogasawara obviously got posted to MLB, and he's now with the Washington Nationals, got a major league deal with them. So that does open up a spot in their rotation. Ogasawara was with the team for almost a decade. So not really a guy who was considered the ace of this team, but was definitely, one of the reliable number 2 or number 3s. In the 2024 draft, which took place in October, they got the big prize that everyone wanted in Yumeto Kanemaru. He was the number 1 pitching prospect of the class, and honestly, one of the top pitching prospects in, probably the last 5 to 10 years. He's a lefty with a lot of upside, similar to kind of like a Takahisa Hayakawa from the Rakuten Eagles, who was a top prospect about 5 years ago. Kanemaru is a guy that you expect to be able to become an ace and anchor the rotation for a long, long time. Second round pick of Seiya Yoshida is also pretty notable because he comes out of corporate ball, so he's a little bit older, does seem to be kind of MPB ready. He has a big slider that's been clocked at over 3,000 RPM, so maybe a guy that can help out as a swing man sometime this season. 2024 hitting leaders, minimum 100 plate appearances. So you see that Seiya Hosokawa, who plays right field for this team, he is their best hitter by far. In fact, he's one of the best hitters in all of MPB. A 172 OPS plus. He hit 23 home runs. It's not easy to put the ball over the fence at Nagoya Dome, which is by far the biggest pitcher's park in MPB, as well as the dead ball factor. So Hosokawa has some legit power, and he is by far the best hitter on this team. But you do have Hiroki Fukunaga, up-and-coming infielder who was very impressive last year with a 154 OPS plus. Shingo Usami, who was the backup catcher. Maybe this year he can be promoted to the primary catcher, a 141 OPS plus. Takaya Ishikawa, former top prospect from the 2019 MPB draft. He's had some injuries that have kind of slowed down his development, but a guy that they're banking on to become the future cleanup hitter for this team. Kaito Muramatsu was very good, actually, breaking out as a shortstop. And then, everyone else is not really that notable. Yuki Okabayashi a couple years ago was one of their best hitters. Speedy leadoff man, excellent defender with a strong arm. Didn't really hit much last year, but he does have speed to, wreak havoc on the bases if he is able to get on base. And then you have a guy like Mikiya Tanaka, who, some people had hoped he would be in the Rookie of the Year conversation. The year didn't go too well for them, but he's a very good defender at second base. Over on the pitching side, obviously you see that Rydell Martinez, was their best pitcher in terms of ERA plus, minimum 30 innings pitched, but he's out the door now. Shinya Matsuyama, big strikeout reliever. He's probably, one of the prime candidates to take over as closer, although Tatsuya Shimizu is right there with him. Those two are, very high-end relievers who have both represented Japan at the national level. Matsuyama more of a power pitcher strikeout arm, and Shimizu is more of a ground ball pitcher, but they both have ability in terms of potentially becoming the closer for this team. Hiroto Takahashi, though, is the ace. He had a 1.38 ERA last year, which is good for a 200 ERA plus. Very good strikeout rate, highest ground ball rate in all of MPB as well. Arguably the number one pitcher in all of Japan at this point, a guy who's absolutely going to be in MLB not too far into the future. But otherwise, this team has some really solid bullpen pieces. Guys like Yuki Hashimoto, Koki Saito, Kento Fujishima, they're no slouches. And then, when it comes to the starting rotation, which has been a strength for them in years past, even while they were missing the playoffs all the time, that's actually starting to thin out a little bit. So that's something to keep an eye on here going into 2025. So how does this team line up? Let's go position by position. So catcher, you have Takuya Kinoshita and Shingo Usami. That should be the tandem there. Like I said, Usami probably at this point, given that he's younger and has more offensive upside, I would expect him to take over the backstop position at some point. But Kinoshita's a veteran, good defender. He's still there for now. First base, I think, is a little bit of a question mark. You do have Sho Nakata, who's a longtime veteran, 300 career homers with the Nippon Ham Fighters and the Yomiuri Giants before this. He joined Chunichi last year as a free agent, had a really rough season, didn't really do much. But if you want to try to reintegrate him into the lineup, definitely his position would have to be first base because there is no DH in the Central League. But Jason Vossler, who they brought in obviously as a free agent, can kind of play all over, first base, third base, left field. I think he could easily become the first baseman as well. Second base, right now, new manager Inoue wants to have Hiroki Fukunaga there, who played mostly third base last year. But the aforementioned Mikiya Tanaka is right there behind him. Third base, Takuya Ishikawa should be the guy. Like I said, former top prospect. They really want him to kind of become a big core piece as this rebuild goes on. So he should be penciled in there as the everyday third baseman. Shortstop, they do have some options other than Muramatsu, who broke out last year. Ryuku is a excellent defender, a guy who took a pretty big step back these past few years, but at one point was a pretty highly touted prospect. They do also have a veteran like Yamamoto there. They have guys like Orlando Caliste, utility men that can play it. And then the outfield, Jason Vossler in left. You also have prospects in Kenta Bright and Kosuke Ukai, who may be able to establish themselves. Yuki Okabayashi in center, and then Seiya Hosokawa, the best overall player on this team, in right. Yohei Oshima, kind of a veteran, who has over 2,000 career hits. He's the fourth or fifth outfielder on this team. And then finishing off with the pitching, the rotation obviously spearheaded by Hiroto Takahashi, who is really, really good. It's just a matter of how many innings can he give you this year. I think you can very reasonably expect a very, very low ERA, depending on how dead the balls are. Another sub-2 would be very much possible. He's kind of tracking a lot like early career Yoshinobu Yamamoto at this point. Kodai Umetsu, he's had Tommy John in the past, but I still think his stuff is very, very good. Last year, the ERA was a bit high, wasn't the best season for him, but I think, given enough opportunities, enough time to recover from his various injuries, I think he's going to show that the talent is legit. He's a top of the rotation caliber arm. Kyle Muller, I think, is going to slide in very nicely. Like I said, in MLB, he had very solid run prevention in 2024. So already that's a lot of promise, but I also think the fact that he's like 6'6", 6'7", with a higher arm slot, that is a look that a lot of MPB hitters are not used to. So I think he's going to play very well. Yumito Kanemaru is not going to join the rotation from day one, but maybe about a month into the season, like May, they might call him up. Trying to load manage him as well because he threw a ton of innings in college. So eventually I do think he's going to be in the middle of this rotation, and I think he's going to be elite. Yuya Yanagi back in 2021 won the Central League ERA title and strikeout title. So this was a very high-end pitcher at one point. He has regressed heavily over the past few seasons, but a bounce back is always possible. Hideaki Wakui, a big veteran that they traded for a number of years ago, approaching 40 years old, but he can still give you a start here and there. Matsuki Hira and Nakachi are two young prospects that have had a little bit of time at the MPB level so far, but haven't really established themselves. I think both of them have a very strong shot to slide in at the back of the rotation this year. And then they have guys like Takahiro Matsuba, Humberto Mejia, who can also eat some innings and be depth pieces. Bullpen, like I said, no more Rydell Martinez. Hurts, but Chunichi probably are one of the few teams that can live without him because Shinya Masayama, Tatsuya Shimizu are both excellent. And then a lot of the other guys who I mentioned before can get the job done as well. So, expectations for the Chunichi Dragons here in 2025, they're going to want to make the playoffs, obviously. They haven't done that in over a decade now, but it might be a year too early. I think this team is very much trending in the right direction. They've been, building up a pretty decent offensive core in guys like Seiya Hosokawa, Hiroki Fukunaga, Takuya Ishikawa, and I believe, certain names like Kenta Bright are going to be there eventually. So, other than some question marks in the back end of the starting rotation, this team actually looks decent on paper, but it may take another year for them to actually take that big step forward and re-enter the playoff conversation. So, probably most people are going to expect them to be around 4th or 5th place, but another last place finish would definitely be unacceptable. So the Chunichi Dragons looking to make big improvements in 2025. Let's see if they're able to make that a reality.